Hello, once again, everyone. My name is Tia Dayam, and this is the Seniors Lead Show. LCC Media Foundation got a grant, and part of the terms of that grant is to talk to seniors up and down Alberta, talk to seniors everywhere, ask them how they are getting on in this pandemic. And since we've been doing this, we've gotten a lot of encouraging comments like, oh, so the government is interested in giving us a voice. The government wants to hear what we're thinking. Yes, they're interested. So this is for seniors, especially for seniors. And tonight I have a senior, like none other. She's a mom, she's a friend, she's a sister, she's a wife, she's a grandmother. Her name is Alla Ternikova. Good evening, Alla. You're welcome to the Seniors League Show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. So without taking much of your time, because I know we don't have too long to get this done, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
I have a very interesting life. I was born in Soviet Union. I left, we ran away from Soviet Union many years ago with little kids in tow, and we ended up being accepted by Canada. And since that, we've been living in Canada. It's a beautiful country. It's a fantastic place to live and to bring up the children. My husband and I are semi-retired by now. We had beautiful career and beautiful company, and now we're winding it all down. Kids are grown up. I have two grandchildren. My life gave me a big present to be exposed to many different culture, which I accepted and greatly enjoy. Um, there were lately some health problems which I tried to overcome to my best ability. But other than that, I'm in the same boat like everybody else, trying to be as normal as possible during pandemic, trying to be helpful, trying to be patient and useful, because a lot of people are in a very dire situation with all the limitations. So it's tough time for all of us, and I really trying my best to uh, be useful for my family and for people during those difficult times. Thanks God, we didn't have anybody close, very close, who died from COVID, but on a longer relationship, yes, we did have few people who passed away, which is very tragic. But yeah, life is going on. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I think in our communities, we'll know someone who knows someone who's lost someone from the dreaded COVID. But I'm really curious. Do you remember any memories from your childhood growing on in the Soviet Union? Do you remember any memories you'd like to share with us about growing about your childhood there?
Oh, for sure. I was 27 when we left Soviet Union, so of course I remember. Life in Soviet Union was very difficult. There was very much oppression, and we lived behind what we used to call iron curtain. So we had no idea what was happening in the whole world because it was hidden from us, and there was a lot of brainwashing, a lot of propaganda, um, a lot of repression. People used to be taken away by Soviet government, and family would never heard about those people again. um, I remember a lot of stories that my mom and my dad were telling me about the war, because their parents went through the war. So it was very difficult life, and after the war it was very difficult for people to reestablish, to rebuild the life, the new life. um, so my mom and dad are children of war. They grew up during the Second World War, so it definitely affected them, and definitely affected me, because I'm a child of children of war, and the same with my husband. Uh, I am very fortunate that we had the chance to get our children out of that country and give them possibility to grow up in Canada. The childhood was very difficult because everything was a problem. Like we had to fight and survive for survival, for food, for housing. Like housing was terrible. Like there were like two, three, four generations living in the same place, overcrowded. So it was very hard. And now living in Canada, I truly can say what a difference it is between the life in former Soviet Union and now the freedom. Um, one of my most wonderful um, not the memories, but one of the things which I treasure a lot is the things that I can vote in Canada. People used to die for that chance to do that. So for me, growing up in different country, it's such a big deal that I actually have a voice and people actually listen to it. What else would you like to know? Oh, another thing about my childhood, I did a lot of sports. I did sports all my life, technically speaking. I did gymnastics, horseback riding, ice skating. It was a good part that in former Soviet Union, all those sports were free, but they would be free for the talented kids. The sport people would go from school to school and choose the best kids and train them mercilessly, like hours of training. But it was free. We didn't have to pay for it. So I remember getting up like at 4 o'clock in the morning, get my training before school and after school. But I loved it. I did lots of dancing, lots of gymnastics. So it was my fun, my enjoyment. I still dance, believe it or not. um, so yeah.
That's really sweet. I'm just curious, when you were doing sports and you were dancing, was there anything in particular you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, the truth to be told, I'm a Jew. So back in Russia, in Soviet Union, Jewish kids were like second hand kids, like no, not second hand, like second lower quality. We never had the same chances what Russian or Ukrainian kids would have. So for us to pursue post-secondary education or any professional sport was very difficult, way more difficult for kids from other backgrounds. So I endured a lot of humiliation and a lot of unfairness, but people, I guess, get used to it. So I just persevered from the beginning, from the tiny age. I remember my parents would and my grandparents would tell me to succeed on the same level with Russian kids, you have to be like 3,000 better than them. Otherwise, you have no choices. And another thing which I remember from my childhood, because my parents, my family was beating it into my head that everything what I do, because we were a minority in the country, right? Everything what I do, all my people are behind me. So if I do something stupid or wrong, everybody will say, "Oh, those Jews, they're all bad. They're all terrible." Just because I myself, as a representative of everybody, would do something wrong. So it was engraved in my head forever and ever. So whatever I do, I'm very serious how I do it, what the results are going to be. And I know in Canada is different, right? But I guess it's left forever. Whatever I do, my people, my background is always behind me. I represent them.
What you just said there about the way you're Jewish and that in Soviet Union, you had to do 3,000 times better than the Russian and the Ukrainian children. Touched a nerve there because as a black person, I refer to my time in the UK, that was like the expectation. And for you to be accepted anyway, you've just got to work a little bit harder. And that little bit could be between 101% to
Yeah.
550% just to get that kind of visibility or acknowledgement that you're even there. So must have when you look at your life now, what sort of reflections do you have about that period? How hard you had to work? How were
You
you
know,
bitter against?
I wanted to add a little bit to what you just said, because here people pursue me as a white person, and very often accuse me of being Karen, if you know what I'm saying, right? Back in Russia, it was totally different. Jewish people look very different than Russian people, so I was a visible minority, right? So technically speaking, I was on both sides. So I truly understand how hard it is. Uh, Very often you just walk in and people pursue you as not good just because the way you look, right?
Mm,
So what you're saying, I truly understand because I grew up with that. About living in Canada, you know, every December 18, we celebrate our arrival in Canada from Italy. We went a long way because we couldn't legally leave Soviet Union. We technically speaking ran away with a bogus invitation from bogus relatives, because otherwise Soviet government would never let us go. So we basically left with what we had and two little kids, like what we had, what we could put in a suitcase, right? So over all those years that we lived in Canada, there was not even 1 second that I regretted our choice. In the beginning, of course, it was very difficult because none of us spoke English. We had no friends, no relatives. It was just me, my husband, and two little kids. So it was very tough in the beginning. And to tell you the truth, I cried buckets. But what uh, made the big difference on our first Christmas, uh, well, I personally felt very down because it was scary, it was new, we didn't know what to do. So, first Christmas in the morning, I opened the door, the front door, and there was a gigantic box the size of old TVs with all kind of goodies in it, like presents for kids, food, clothes, like you name it, everything, like the gigantic box. And I still don't know who brought it, who made it for us. But it was a moment that I thought, I think that I'm in a good place and everything will be okay. And from that moment, things kind of started to look better. So yeah, we got the education, we built the company, we raised children, we had foster children. So yeah, life in Canada is incredible. Like anybody who wants to succeed, anybody who wants a good future for their children, it's here. It's here.
mm. Like I like to ask, have you been back to Russia since you came?
I haven't actually. Well, I'm saying Russia, but actually we're from Ukraine. So Soviet Union, when Soviet Union was a country, Russia and Ukraine were neighboring countries, neighboring provinces, technically speaking. Now it's two different countries, but in those days it was neighboring provinces, like say Alberta and BC, for example, right? Um, can you repeat the question?
Um, I was just wondering if you've been back just to
Oh,
compare.
when you build
I'm
the
sure
no.
things are
Yeah,
different now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So here is the story. we received that bogus invitation, with which were able to leave the country. It was a customary to make a shameful meeting for people who decided to go away. The government put together usually gigantic room and say, like, look, those people, they're traitors, they hate their motherland, they don't like living in this country, they're terrible, they're horrible, they're traitors, and on and on and on for a couple of hours. Even our older daughter, who was just about 6 years old at that time, even she had to go through the same procedure in daycare. And she came home crying, saying that the whole daycare was telling her that she's a bad girl because she's going to live in a different country, and kids were making fun of her and pointing at her. 6 years old kid had no idea what was going on, right? And so before we left, we had to give up everything what we had, including our passport. So we were stripped from our citizenship in Soviet Union. And so we left with a very heavy hearts. And no, we never came back. I developed very close relationship with totally new culture for me, but now it's part of me. But no, we never wanted to go back. And
Mm.
um, yeah, I don't even, honestly, I don't even feel uh,
Mm.
homesick. My home is in Canada,
Mm.
and one of my cultures is the Latino culture. I'm very involved in the life of Latina culture in Edmonton. Um, so yeah, and my younger daughter, she's married to a Turkish guy. So see, this is what I'm saying, that our family is so rich because we are exposed to many different cultures, and we enjoy it tremendously. I do keep a lot of old tradition, especially like holidays and food, but other than that, that's pretty much all.
Mm. Well, that's beautiful. Can you tell me about your parents? So you left with your husband and children. Did you leave your parents behind?
Well, I mentioned that there was gigantic amount of propaganda in Soviet Union, and people truly believe that the life outside Soviet Union is just terrible. I remember that when my grandfather decided to leave the country, the doctors were telling him, like, look, you are diabetic, you're going to leave the country and you're going to die like a dog on the street because you're not going to get your insulin injection. Can you believe it? Well, after he moved to Canada, he lived almost 30 years more after the promise of Soviet doctors that he will be dead soon.
Mm.
So, as I mentioned, grandparents all lived through the war. My both grandfathers went through the whole entire war from the beginnings to the end, and lost their health there. My father came back with no teeth. They were so starved and so exhausted. He lost all his teeth. He developed tuberculosis. My mother father was wounded terribly and disfigured, but he went through the whole war. So the one who was left in Russia, he died very young. The one who had the chance to move to Canada, lived until very, very old age. My parents were children of war, so they'd never had a childhood
Mm.
per se, because my mom was taken away into deep of the country with her mom and a brother. So they lived through a lot of tough time with no food. Food was literally scarce. Like at some point, my grandma was imprisoned because she went to the market to change some tobacco for bread to feed the kids, and she was arrested. So my mother grandfather, who didn't have both legs, ended up with four little children by himself because the grandma was imprisoned because she wanted to exchange some goods for food. So he brought all the little kids. The older one was probably around 9, and the rest were younger. He brought them to the police station and said, I'm leaving the kids here. I can take care of them. Do whatever you want. And so my grandma was freed and was allowed to go home because no, there was nobody else to look after the kids. My father, being a little boy, was under occupation with his mother. Again, food was scarce, repressions were everywhere, so it was very hard childhood. And my father disappeared during the war and came back 10 years later. So nobody knew, is he alive, where he is, what's happening. He just came back one day, and nobody even recognized him in the beginning until he explained who he is, because he was very exhausted, starved, looked much older than his real age. So my parents managed, like everybody else, grow up, get education, got to know each other, got married. Families in former Soviet Union were very small because life was very tough. So I'm the only kid. I don't never had brothers or sisters. So my parents came 2 years after us to Canada, and my father died only 3 years ago, only because he lived in Canada. All my mother and father friends who were left behind in Soviet Union, they died like maybe 15, 20 years before them. So the life is very, especially for pensioners, the life there is still very difficult. There is no money, there is no food, everything is scarce. So old people are really, really struggling in former Soviet Union country, former Soviet Union republic, but now they are all different countries.
Hmm. I'm sorry to be taking you back down memory lane. Are you okay with the questions?
Yeah, yeah. Well, if we won't be talking about it, people forget. Next generation will forget. And, the next generation are bound to repeat the same mistakes because they will not know the past, right? I can't remember who said that those who don't remember the past are bound to repeat the same mistakes from the past. So my family and a lot of members, like extended family members, went through the Holocaust. A lot of people were murdered during the war. Like the city where I was born and grew up had a place where about I don't know, about 8,000 people were shot and buried in shallow grave. So I remember when I was a kid, when the rains were uh, too strong, the water would wash out the bones, the human bones. I remember that well, right? Um, as a kid, I didn't understand how grave it was. Like for us, it was kind of fun to find that and play with that. But now, when I look back, I see how horrible it was. So we need to talk about it. Otherwise, we can face the same problem in the future. And I really hope that my children and my grandchildren will never live from what we live. That's why we left Soviet Union. So our children and their children will never face the same difficult situations.
I want to ask you this question, and if you can't answer it, Alla is fine. Um, since you've been to Canada, have you talked to anybody about what your family went through, what you went through in the Soviet Union? Or maybe you try to journal it in a book. Have you done any kind of?
No, not really. Not really. There are many reasons why not. We try to give kids like little amount of that knowledge, but a lot of it is so traumatic uh, that sometimes I don't even know just to tell them a general story or give them all the details. For example, my father was ordered in 1937. Seven. He was ordered to shoot the whole entire village of women and children because their men were hiding in the forest fighting Soviet government, Soviet system, right? And he refused, so he was taken into prison. And when the war started, those people from the prison were sent straight to the front lines into the war. So he went through the war as prisoner, which was like no people with no meaning of their life. Like, well, a prisoner dies. What? Who cares, right? So it was even harder than for other soldiers, other military people. And he came back home in 1949. So for all those years, his wife, my grandma, had no idea. Was he alive? Not? What's happening? How he died? Didn't die? Like nothing. There was no communication over those years. So we tried to tell our kids a little bit of that, but we don't want to overwhelm them with so many stories. It's very tragic story. Now people read it in a book, people read it, people make movies about it. But when it's like your real life, it's really deep.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, we do talk to the kids, but like on a larger level, uh, me personally, no, I never talked about it.
It sounds to me like there's a lot of trauma, and I feel like I'm sitting in person and listening to you, and there's a lot more I want to hear. I'm just wondering if this is a platform for that. So when you came to Canada at 27, you just put a wall and you forgot the past and you left the past in the past and you never visited it or even opened the door, or you opened the door just a little bit.
Well, I can't say I close the door because your past make your present and your future, right? Your past shape you. And not just me, our children as well, because we're raising our children, right? So our past affects our children, right? And I'm not saying just us, it's every family is like that. So I wouldn't say that I close the door. We have to remember, right? But we made a pact with my husband that we're living in a new country and we're going to learn new way of living, and that's how we're going to bring up our children. So it was a very hard decision because it's very hard to change yourself, right? But we see good results, and we see even better results with grandchildren, because I remember my childhood or my husband's childhood, what he says to me, who tells me, our children, our grandchildren are obviously having better lives. And that's basically was the reason why we left, right? To make our children and our grandchildren and further generation better people in better places, right? So yeah, I won't say I close the door and I revisit past a lot. Uh, and it is traumatic, but you can't forget your past because that's your history, right?
Hmm, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're going to leave that there for the moment, and we may come back to it another time. I want you to
Mm-hmm.
talk about the process of becoming Canadian. What was that like for you? Because you came here as a big girl, you're 27. Did you have to go to university? Did you have to go to how did you learn English? Talk to me about the process of becoming Canadian.
Well, we left Soviet Union, technically speaking, illegally because we received a totally bogus invitation from a bogus person, and it was only one way to leave the country, right? So we went through Austria, Italy, and then applied to many countries to accept us. And Canada said, well, with your occupation and your age and two young kids, we're taking you in. So we ended up coming to Montreal with no English or French. But in Montreal, the government gave us a free French school, full time French school with a child care, free child care, and even paid us some money. For us, for people who grew up in Soviet Union, it was, oh, I don't know. Just imagine that you won all the best things in the whole world just in front of you. That's how we felt in that time. It was absolutely incredible. So we learned French, and then my husband found job in Alberta. So he left, and I was in Montreal with two kids for another 6 months, and then I joined him. So we came here, kids went to school, but we were not eligible for free school in English because we received our French school and we didn't have money to pay for any schooling. So my husband went to work with his profession, and he's a professional carpenter, and he basically knows pretty much all um, trades you can think about. Um, and he's very talented at that. And I went to work in daycare because it was right in our backyard, like the place where we lived, and in the back of it was a daycare. So I went there with my hands and few words which I could say in English. I explained that I'm looking for work and my daughter needs a place in daycare. So the owner, fantastic, wonderful, caring woman, like wonderful. She made such a big difference in my life. She accepted me, and my younger daughter started to go to that daycare, and that's how I learned my English. Kids are wonderful teachers. They're very patient. They use a very simple language, and they will be repeating the same thing until you get what they want. And all those, little rhymes and poems and games which little kids play, I learned them. That's how I learned the beginning of English. But then, with time I progressed, and the same lady, the owner of the daycare, she was able to put me in an early childhood program. It was in the time free for people who worked in daycare. And I went there with not knowing the English. So first couple of weeks, people thought that I don't know, really challenged with my development because I couldn't understand anything. And then I managed to put together the words that I just don't speak English. That's why I don't understand anything what they're saying. But my academic education from Soviet Union helped me a lot. So I finished that course with flying colors and worked in daycare for quite a few years. And that's how I learned English. And then I started to read. I love reading. I can read in four languages now easily. And basically, my English came from mainly from books. So my written English is much better than my spoken or my hearing. And my husband learned his English on his job. He was doing all kind of commercial construction, renovation work, and hey, you need to talk to people, right? So you learn. So
Yeah.
that's how we learned English.
Oh wow, that's sweet. I just wanted to. Someone has just asked here: is there a big Ukrainian community in Edmonton? Is there a big Ukrainian community in
Yes.
Edmonton?
You know what? Hold on a second. I have to turn my stove on. I'm
Okay.
baking food for supper. Just hold on.
Okay. This is the Senior Lit Show, the Seniors Lit Show, and we have Alla Ternikova taking us through our journey. We're going to take a short break now. Don't worry.
You know what? My husband and my daughters already did it and they eating it. Aren't they good or what?
Okay, Alla, let's take a short 15-minute break. Just
Okay.
15 second, 15 second. Don't go away. Okay,
Okay.
just to play commercial. Don't go away. Thank you for watching. Hey, this is the Senior Slate Show. Thank you for watching. We've been talking to Alla about um, a journey to becoming a Canadian. She's a senior. And the last question was: is there a big Ukrainian community in Edmonton?
Right.
Yes, and you were just going to answer that.
You see, here goes the specific of life in Soviet Union. I consider myself a Jew because I was born in Jewish family. But my culture is Russian because it was uh, pushed into everybody who lived in Soviet Union. You had to know Russian language and culture and everything. But I was born in Ukraine, so I am Ukrainian culture is part of my culture as well. I speak fluently Ukrainian language, but for most people who consider themselves Ukrainian here, I'm not Ukrainian enough for them.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how to explain it in more details, but yeah, we have good relationship. I have a lot of friends from that community, but to be active in that community, it just didn't turn out. But you know how I saved myself? Because people cannot live without the community. I became a president of a community league, neighborhood community league, and I was for almost 10 years. And I was representing another 15 together, community leagues in Edmonton. And I did it for, as I said, for about 9 years, which was fantastic. So I was the president of one of the communities. I built that community. And you know how I did it? I started to bring free food. I started to cook at home and bring free homemade food for our meetings. And that's how the word spread out. And at that time, it was a quite active, beautiful community. So I built my community.
Oh, that's so sweet. So I hear what you're saying. You're Jewish, Russian. And I'm just wondering, now that you're retired, are there any communities that you still identify with, that you do things together with?
Oh boy, I identify myself with a lot of things. um, well, as I said, Jewish culture is my culture, Russian culture is my culture, Ukrainian culture is my culture. And I'm also Yoruba, and I'm also Palera. So Latina cultures is my culture. I speak Spanish. I have beautiful religious communities in Cuba. So yeah, and well, I live in Canada. Canada is my home. So see how rich I am. It's I think I'm blessed like to have so many scenes in one life. Like it's a gigantic big deal for I don't know for me.
Absolutely. So, what job? I know you worked at a nursery with your
Yeah.
at some point in your life, but what job did you do for most of your life, and what did you
Y-
like the most about it?
You know, I actually did quite a bit of scenes in my life. I did work in daycare for about 4 years in the beginning, and I enjoyed it tremendously. It was like going to on a holiday every morning and get paid for it. Because working with the kids, it's just joy, right? But then it came to the point that I have no things to talk about with adults. You know, like you spend 8 hours a day with little kids, which is fantastic, and then you feel like out of place with adults. So I decided to change my career. I worked for quite a few years with financial services company, and I was personal financial advisor. So I learned a lot of very important things and taught a lot of people a lot of very important financial uh, basic. And I did a lot of work with women. I used to come to organizations like Changing Together, Mennonite Center, to talk to immigrants because a lot of immigrants bring their preconceived notion from their own countries how the finances should work. And I'm not saying it's a wrong way, but Canada is different. So a lot of immigrants miss that point where you must learn. You must learn. Um, I've seen a lot of good and a lot of bad in that area because there were a lot of immigrants who wanted to learn and there are a lot of immigrants who didn't, who would say, well, why should I? I already know. I've been doing my finances for whatever, say 30 years, 40 years in my country. You know nothing more than I do, right? So I have good stories and the bad stories from that part of work. And I worked a lot with women, because in many old countries, it's the man who does everything, right? And then just bring money to use for women. And in Canada, women must have their names in the bank, must, right? I've seen clients dying and their women had no access to anything, no name in the bank. Like it was a disaster. I've seen it with my eyes, so I put years into talking, educating women. Like you have to be present in financial life in Canada. You have to. So it was very exciting, and oh my goodness, I really liked the job. And then I moved on. I had the co-op in Dominican Republic, and I started working with men, which didn't turn out very well because the moment they started to make more money, they started to have more women, and women started to be very upset with me. So I put a break on that, and I started to work with women, giving them very small money to start their own business. And I created a system which was quite workable. So there are quite a few women even now in Dominican Republic who prospered because of what I did,
Mhm.
which is wonderful, isn't it? Uh, Boy, I did so many things in my life. Well, I had few foster kids when our kids were small, and we took older kids. Like everybody likes little babies, right? Like they're cute, they're chubby and smiley, right? We took teenagers and difficult teenagers. So very often it was like difficult. But in the end of the day, everything worked out well, and all those kids prospered and doing quite well now, including my kids.
Hmm. Mm.
Gee, what else did I do? Like it was so many. Then I was very involved. Then when our business prospered enough that I didn't have to work for money, I did a lot of volunteer work in Edmonton. I was involved in all three levels in government. I even put my name in ballot for um, municipal government. I was part of the election couple of years. What it was, 8? No, it was 12 years ago by now. Yeah, 12. I didn't win, but it was exceptionally interesting and fulfilling experience. And as I said, I was involved a lot with community league, and I worked a lot. Like I was pushing hard
Mm. Mm.
uh, for
Mm.
immigrants because a lot of people from many countries come to Canada with excellent credential, with excellent experience, and become invisible people. I used to get very angry on a lot of meetings, yelling, pretty much yelling and shouting. Well, not really, but close to that, saying, go to any cab and ask any driver about the education. And this man who's driving the cab has university degree. How more wrong you can go with your new people? Like how more screw up system you can do with such uh, wasting of resources, right?
Mm.
So I did a lot of work on that field. At some point, we even discovered a group of people that we didn't even know live in Canada. Yeah. So it was very interesting.
Mm.
So I
That's,
did a lot of paid work and a lot of volunteer work before I retired.
that is incredible. Now, if you won $1 million tomorrow, what would you do with the money?
Oh, I'll tell you what. I'm a Santera, which is very, very ancient African based religion. In Cuba, it changed somewhat, but it came from Africa, which is very old culture. And a lot of scenes, especially in Santeria in Cuba, a lot of information is passed uh, by mouse from elder to the new member. And the problem with that is when that elder dies before his time, all the knowledge which he had goes away with him or her. It's gone forever. Like I lost in since I became uh, Yoruba in Cuba, we lost two elders, which I knew well, and they were wells of knowledge. And everything what they knew is gone forever. So if I would have $1 million, I would start an academy and where people can learn all the wisdom and also start writing down all those wise sayings. Like in Christianity, there is a Bible. In Yoruba, we call it pataki. There are literally hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of stories, and each of those stories have a meaning, a lesson. So elders very often, instead of saying you should do this or you should do that, tell you a story. And it's your responsibility to learn, to find why the story was told to you, what you need to learn from that story. And I can tell you a few of them. They're very interesting and have a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom in them. So, and all that knowledge will be dead one day because some of it is passed to new generation and some of them is not. So if I would have $1 million, I would start an organization which would formalize and organize all the knowledge because the negative part of that by mouse culture, there are a lot of people who pretend they know, and then it creates a lot of problems. So a lot of people end up in the wrong hands. Basically, you go to a person who you think is a specialist, and this person is only after the money. So I would spend my $1 million putting together on paper for the memory of the future generation, knowledge of, I would say, about 60,000 years. Like, can you imagine how much knowledge was created and saved over all those thousands of years? So that's what I would do with
Mm.
my $1 million.
Yes, that's really good because at the foundation as well, we are particular about gathering knowledge, sharing knowledge, and we like
Mm-hmm.
a knowledge based set of people because knowledge is important and we rise by what we know. We rise simply in different spheres of life by what we know. I have three more questions, and I know I've taken enough of your time. Forgive me. But this
For sure.
interview has been so
Okay,
rich.
I just wanted to tell you that our memories, our knowledge, that's what makes us human. There are few people who, for whatever tragic reason, lose their memories, and then nobody, right? Like memories and knowledge, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us, right? Um, so what you said is so much true that we, especially as women, we are keepers of that knowledge, right?
Yeah,
And if we're not going to pass it to next generation, who will?
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead with your questions.
Yes, I'm here. Okay, so I was going to ask you, what is the best compliment you've ever received? And what books, when you came, what books did you eventually start to read that changed your life? Was there a particular book that changed your life? And what's the best compliment you've ever received?
You know, I will tell you a funny story because it is a best compliment. Um, I was born with some defect in my jaws. So here in Canada, I was able to fix it, but it took 5 years, and the dentist put braces on me. So for 5 years, me with my hair um, was in braces. And one day we were in a swimming pool, and one little girl about 5 years old was looking at my face and my mouth and looking and looking and looking. And I said, "What are you looking at?" And she said, "Your teeth is better than my grandma." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Because they're shiny." And it was such a, the way she said, it was because they're shiny. And I think it was the best compliment I ever got. Books. Oh my goodness. I'm reading holic. I read in four languages to start with. I love reading the same book in different languages because a lot of the books are translated from one language to another. I wish I could read in French. I can't. Like, I mean, I do read and I can grasp the idea, but not to the point that I enjoy reading. And I can't pinpoint one book. Oh my goodness. I At some point I read enormous amount of self-help book. I was probably a junkie, self-help junkie, because every course, every book which I could find, I would sign myself up and go. So I learned a lot. Now I read such books less. Um, but I honestly can't even think about. I love my favorite book is The Little Prince, Saint-Exupéry, and I read that book in all four languages, which is beautiful. But to say which book changed my life, hundreds, like literally hundreds of them,
Hmm,
and I still read a lot.
hmm.
So yeah, I don't know how much I answer your question, but
No, no, that was well answered. And the thing you said about seeing the dentist and getting your teeth fixed rings a bell as well. Everyone who's had something done at the dentist that changes the way they smile would appreciate the compliments. I know what you're talking about. Okay, so this is my very last question to you. How would you define a good life or a successful life? How would you define a good life?
Good life or successful life? Because it's not the same, actually.
It's up to
Actually,
you. Just
I'll answer for both.
okay, good.
Success, success. It's when you build something, whatever it is, and you teach other people your knowledge, and then one day you disappear quietly. And nobody knows that you're not there anymore because everything running smoothly without you.
Mm,
That's a success. And
mm,
I can put it to anything, be that a business or children or
mm,
relationship
mm,
or education.
mm, mm,
At least it's in my opinion, that's what success is. Happiness, it's harder to answer. Um, you know, I guess happiness comes from inside out, right? Um, if you're happy inside, you make happy everything around you, right? It kind of spills from inside out. Um, I love people. This pandemic really encroached into very important part of my life because before pandemic and before I got problem with my health, I used to spend all the time with people, and I miss it terribly. And that's what brought my happiness. So now with WhatsApp, with email, with all kind of technology things, I still in touch with a lot of people all over the world. But you know what? Nothing can replace a real hug to a real human being. Like no amount of letters or no amount of tokens the way we talk. And that's what I guess would brings the most happiness to me. Be physically around good people, good positive people.
mm. So your husband is around you. How have you dealt with the pandemic, like isolation? What do you do to keep busy? I guess that's my question.
Well, because we both have busy life, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of projects which stayed in boxes for ages. And now we said, well, now is the time to phase those projects. So my husband is building a spa downstairs. He almost done with sauna. There will be therapeutic shower, exercise room, massage table. So that's what he is doing. When he's done with that, he wants to have a little inside greenhouse because we have a greenhouse outside. But with our winters and our late springs, he wants to have another one inside the house. So everything is ready to go out in a good shape by May, beginning of June. And we have a gigantic garden. Well, not gigantic, very big, but it has everything: fruits, vegetables, berries, fish pond, you name it. So it takes his time and he keeps himself busy. With me, I am doing a lot of projects which I wanted to do for years. I have boxes with kids' crafts from the school time when my kids, which are in their 30s, uh, did a lot of wonderful craft. And it was in boxes all those years. So now I'm organizing them. Some of them I'm putting in albums. Some of them I make photos and put in albums. The same with photos. There are boxes and boxes of photos which I now organize in a nice, usable way. And there is another thing which I love to do now. I have a lot of time. I do a lot of sewing. Like before the pandemic, I used to dance a lot, and I did most of my costumes myself for dancing. So now I have a lot of time to make those costumes. So I truly enjoy that time. I do lots of my clothes myself. Sometime I knit, but not as much, mostly sewing. So, oh, and another thing which we do with my husband a lot, we read. He reads, actually. He reads, I do the sewing. But we have a lot of favorite books, and he reads for me aloud. And I love cooking and baking. I do lots and lots of cooking and baking. Um, so that's how we keep ourselves busy. So I cannot say that we're bored out of our minds because we're busy. It's just a human touch, being with other people physically. That's what horribly missing.
Mm, mm, mm. I hear you. Before we let you go, what is your best piece of advice for living? Do you have a philosophy of life? The best piece of advice for living
For younger generation or for people my age?
for all generations. What is your
For all
philosophy?
generation.
Hmm.
Be open to life, because very often we make plans or pictures in our heads and say, if things will go this way, or if I can do this and that, or somebody in my life will achieve that and this and that, then I will be happy. And it never happens this way. So life changes on a dime, on a dime. And I guess the best advice is to be open to those changes, because, there is a Jewish proverb which says, when God takes something from your hands, it's for the reason to open them up so he can put something new in your hands. So I would say that would be the best advice, because a lot of people, including me, very often get stuck with what we think we should have or what we think should happen. And life always make changes with that. So be open to life and
Hmm.
learn to enjoy whatever comes into your life.
Yeah, that's profound actually, and that makes sense. Be open and don't live life according to your own agenda. Be open to new things.
Yeah.
Hmm. All right, with that, we got to wrap this up. I want to say thank you so much, Alla. We've taken a good portion, a good chunk of your time this evening. I'm desperately grateful. Thank you for opening yourself to this program, to this chat, for trying out new technology.
We did.
Wow,
You
thank
see,
you.
and I'm so grateful. That's exactly what I was saying. Like, keep yourself open to new opportunity. I found the ad about the organization on Facebook by accident, and I accepted in my life. And I learned so much, and I meet fantastic people. It just, I don't know, beautiful. See, I'm so happy I met you in my life. And I'm sure there will be a lot of more beautiful things to come.
I agree. I agree. Okay, so with that, we'll
Take
let you
care.
go. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night now.
Bye.
Bye.